Well, welcome back. About 20 years ago, I started writing Bible based Christian fiction. And this story retells the story of John the Baptist. So it is linked to the Christmas story. So let's see what happens. A Time for Miracles, Chapter 1. It was a time for miracles. Miracles were all around me. I don't know why. I can't reason it out. I just know that I witnessed miracles, and I'm glad to have been there to witness and can now report. It was a time for miracles. My name is Reuben, and the miracles began, for me at least, when I was but a child of 5 years. That year was spectacular. I remember it as if it was but a moment ago. My father, along with the rest of his school of priests, had brought families to Jerusalem to serve in the temple. It was a great honor, one that happened once in a lifetime for a local priest like my father. He had spent a year in joyful preparation, knowing that he and the others in our group would be the best of priests to serve in Jerusalem for a generation. Certainly, he assured us all, they would serve better than the buffoons who were scheduled in the rotation for last year. His joy was short-lived once we arrived in the Holy City. He returned one evening early on, no longer exuberant after a tiring day of offering sacrifices. "Outrage!" he shouted to no one in particular, but to the family in general. "It is an outrage, I say." Father paced back and forth, swinging his apron around as if it were a weapon. The fire in his eyes was no longer the excitement from being a temple priest, but an electric anger that pierced the air around him wherever his gaze fell. "Lem," Mother responded quietly in that voice she used to soothe the little ones when they were distraught. "You'll wake the baby. Besides, you're frightening the children." She turned to me. "Reuben, fetch some wine to calm your father's nerves." "Wine, you say?" Father fairly turned on my mother. "Yes, I need some wine. Bring me the jug, boy. Don't bother with a cup." I had often seen my father angry, but never driven to drink. However, I ran to the small back room to fetch the demanded wine, for to keep his anger directed somewhere besides at me. When I returned, he was finally getting to the point about which his anger circled. "No choice at all," Father was saying, his voice still loud. He grabbed the jug of wine from me and took a long drink straight from the neck. Mother chose the moment to try to ease Father's anger. "But the lot was cast, was it not, Lemuel?" Lot, yes, the lot was cast," Father returned. "I'm not sure what is better to believe. That the old reprobate somehow fixed the lot, bought out the priest in charge of something, or if the Almighty himself had chosen to make a laughingstock out of our entire group." "But, Lemuel, I know them," Mother responded again in her quiet, soothing voice. "Elizabeth is one of the most beloved women in our community, and Zechariah is known to be an upright man." "Beloved, upright, huh!" My father spit the words out as if they filled his mouth with bitterness. "How can a woman be loved, especially by the Almighty? How can a man be righteous when the evidence against them is so strong?" "Evidence? What evidence?" was my mother's question. "Children, Rachel, children," Father answered, taking another sip of the wine in his hand. "We have been blessed, you know. We have 4 with another on the way. Zora, Hiram's wife, has given him 2 children already. Ezekiel has 9 children. Why, even old Ezra has a son. But this Zechariah, this old fool who insists on continuing to serve, although everyone knows that couples without children remain so as long as they harbor unrepentant sin." I knew now who was the cause of my father's current rage. It was the old Zechariah. He and his wife Elizabeth spent most days in our home village playing grandpa and grandma to all the children in town. She baked pies and left them to cool in the window where she knew that the boys of town would steal them. He played ball with us and gave wooden trinkets to the children, little toys that he carved from scraps around the house. What I knew of the old couple could not be brought in as evidence of sin in their lives. It spoke just the opposite in my own mind. But Father knew Scripture. He was educated, and he could tell what constituted sin in one's life much better than I. Perhaps it's the woman's fault. Father was beginning to calm down. The wine was starting to work on his nerves. The jug now half empty. As the evening unfolded, my brother and sister and I learned that the lot was cast to determine who would enter the holiest place on the next week in order to satisfy the annual supplication for all of Israel. This was the custom. And tradition held that only the most righteous of men would be selected at the will of the Almighty by means of casting lots. Father maintained that Zechariah should have excused himself from the selection, seeing that his sin had kept him childless into his old age. Prior to the ceremonial casting of the lot, Father had targeted most of the priests in our group. He knew that he was the most righteous in the group. He also knew little things about all the other men that he insisted would disqualify them from serving. Now that the choice was made, Father contented himself to brood and sip wine. We would see, he kept saying. They would see that they had misread the lots. The proof would happen early next week when Zechariah first entered into the inner regions of the temple. It would be the first time in many years that the other priests would have to make use of the rope tied to the priest chosen for this special duty. The precautions taken to protect our way of life and not allow death to contaminate the temple. The chosen priest wore a rope tied around him. That way, if some hidden sin caused the Almighty to strike him dead, the other priest could drag his body out of the temple and begin the proper cleansing ceremonies. The chosen priest also tied bells to his robes so that he could be heard moving about the tent making the proper sacrifices and supplications. Not in my father's memory could he recall any of the priestly orders having not heard the bells tinkle behind the curtain, let alone having to pull a body from the presence of the Almighty. This year, he insisted, would be marked by the tragedy of the Almighty not accepting the sacrifices made in behalf of Israel. His order of priests would be permanently marked by the stigma of having sent a sinful man into the presence of the Holy One. "You wait, Reuben," he told me more than once that day. "This year will be the downfall of our order. We are sending sin into the holy place. Mark my words." I marked them, and I would remember them for years to come.